Martha, Martha, you were worried and distracted by many things. You get a sense that as it is her home and Martha is the host, that she is running around trying to make sure that this gathering of people is going well. The image that came to mind for me was where I've seen somebody that's spinning plates on poles, where they start spinning one and then they spin another one and then they start another one, and then they got to run back and make sure that the first couple that they started are spinning to see how many of them that they can keep going. And so you get the sense that Martha is doing exactly that, trying to be a good host. And I've been to that party. Been to that party where the host answers in a nice crisp white shirt or a nice dress and welcomes you in and maybe takes your coat off to the place where coats go and offers you a drink and offers you something to eat and introduces you to the people at the place. And they spend that whole time sort of circling around, making sure that everybody's comfortable and everybody is connected and in the space, enjoying themselves. Now the trick with Martha is, as she's going about all of these tasks, she's too busy to realize that she ought to be sitting down with her sister Mary listening to Jesus. And this can happen at those parties that you go to, right? The person that is the consummate host that is bouncing around and around doesn't really enter into the time that's being spent together. They miss the conversation about the new cancer diagnosis that someone has and the little bit of holy space that takes place there. They miss out on the celebration of the engagement or the graduation or whatever it is that another conversation is sharing in. They have their own pains and celebrations that they don't share because they're so busy spinning around from thing to thing to thing. What we see in the story of Mary and Martha is that Martha is too busy spinning all those plates to be able to spend time in relationship. Now, I've heard this story in a lot of settings within the church, and every time we hear it, there's always someone who will say, I was Martha. I was the one always doing the work. My siblings never did anything, and they take on sort of that identity of Martha. And then there's always somebody else who will say, well, I didn't really ignore the work. I just thought there were more important things to do, and my siblings were always tattling on me for not helping out more. And we can tend to try to identify with one or the other of these two sisters. And I would suggest to you today that in the culture that we live in, we probably all are a bit more like Martha than we realize. Because Jesus says, Martha, Martha, you were worried and distracted with many things. First off, we have plenty of things to worry about. In our own personal lives, we have health and jobs and finances and relationships that maybe aren't going well, or whatever all those things are, and that can give us plenty of worry. As a community and as a nation, we worry about terror, we worry about the economy, we worry about government, we worry about all of these things, and all of that worry then sits with us. And when we get worried, what do? We try to do stuff. Because if we can do things, we can try to fend off the things that we're worried about. So if you're worried about jobs, you just work harder. If you're worried about your health, you try to exercise or go to the doctor or try to do the things that will hopefully help you be healthier. And as things happen around our country, there's always a call for action. We need to do this, we need to do that. And we get to where we really busy ourselves and try to stay busy to hopefully distract us from the things that are really worrying us, hopefully try to make something happen to keep those worries from coming to fruition. And we live in a particular time where we celebrate multitasking. Celebrating multitasking is saying we're so good at doing that we can do more than one thing at the same time. And all of the busyness that we have, multitasking seems like it's the only way to survive, and so we celebrate people that are really good at multitasking. That's what it is when you're spinning the plates, by the way, right? You're spinning this plate and this plate and this plate and this plate and this plate. And what happens with all of those plates eventually? They're going to fall and crash. I'm terrible at multitasking. If I'm talking to one person and somebody else comes up and talks to me, I don't register a single word of that. If I'm watching TV and somebody comes and talks to me, I don't even know they're in the room. I don't try to talk on the phone and send an email because the email won't make any sense and the phone conversation won't be anything I remember having happened. And yet, this is what we celebrate. We celebrate this multitasking of spreading our attention across multiple places. And the harder it gets and the busier it gets and the more worries we have, the more we start to do all those things. And it can feel for all of us that we're just trying to keep all these plates spinning just to get from day to day. And all of that then lands us in two particular places that this story highlights for us. The first is division, divisiveness. Martha is upset because Mary's not helping. And so Martha goes to Jesus and says, hey, she's not helping, make her help me. And you can bet that that frustration that Martha has also then irritates Mary, because Mary's sitting in the place that she knows that she ought to be. And so right here you have a little bit of tension and division. And you don't really see it play out in the story, but you know it's there because you feel it from Martha's emotion as she goes and talks to Jesus. So the one thing we can land in with all of the busyness and the worry and the distraction and the multitasking is divisiveness and division. And then the second bit is what I've talked about a little bit already, is that Martha's missing out on Jesus. He's right there bringing this gift of the light of the world, the bread of life, all of that Jesus is right there. And she totally misses out on that relationship because she's spinning all the plates trying to make sure that she's getting all the tasks done and all of the things she's worried about. And I would bet that those worries weren't just limited to Jesus being there. It was probably all of the worries about life, about the next day that was to come or the week that was to come, the neighbors, and all of the things around her. And so she misses out on that relationship. And if you look around our lives, divisiveness and missing out on a relationship, they kind of go together, but we see that all around us. You probably see it in your own lives where the busyness keeps you from dealing with relationships in a healthy way. Maybe you're not home enough, maybe you're working too much, maybe you've had a fight and you don't want to deal with that and you're worried about it, but you're not going to go and try to enter into healthy space there, and so we sit with that divisiveness. And that then gets in the way of relationship. If you look at our national conversation, that's right where we are. Divisiveness and terrible relationships as a result. When you look at tragedies that happen, like the one we had here in Orlando, there's this great rally of unity and support and oneness that we come together in that space. But it doesn't take very long before we start trying to do things again and say, we've got to do this and we've got to do that. And somebody else says, no, you can't do that. We should do this instead. And then we're right back to divisiveness, and the relationships that could have undergirded all that then end up in that space of tension, and we end up missing out on the real health and liveliness that Jesus can bring us. It happens in the church just as it happens in the world, and we can really land in those two places a lot of the time. Now in the story, Jesus comes and brings them relationship. He comes right into Martha's house and sits there with them. And I think what this story can tell us is that Jesus continues to bring us relationship in that way, and in some ways has gifted the church with the church to be the body of Christ in relationship together. Every time we gather in this space, we gather around a table. It's a gathering of people together in a place where Jesus gives himself body and blood to us, gives us the body to make us the body. We gather in this space, all of us, in unity together. It's practice for going out into the world and being community. When we gather around this font, it's about washing away all of that brokenness that Jesus took from us on the cross and raising us up into new people that understand that it's not so much about being busy all the time, but about living in relationship with Jesus that is the center of who we are. Now, I've been to the party where the host is spinning all the plates and missing out on the relationship, but I've also been to a different kind of party, one where the host has done the work. They've cleaned up the place, maybe made some food, invited some people to bring some things along, but once the gathering starts, they're present. They spend the time in conversation. They are in the gathering of people, not running around trying to keep all the plates spinning. They just say, hey, beverages are over there, food's over there. Let's be together in this place. And that's what Jesus brings. He brings into this home of Martha that presence of saying, let's just be together in this place. We had some friends from Great Britain, and we gathered with them quite a few times, and they sit around the dinner table when you do, and you eat, and dinner chairs are generally a little stiff and a little hard. And the first time we were at their house, after dinner, they said, shall we go sit soft? And we looked at them and said, what? And they said, these chairs are hard. Should we go sit in the living room where the chairs are soft and we can have conversation? It was a way of moving of this wonderful time of dinner into a deeper time of conversation in a more comfortable place. And that's the kind of being together in community that they could engender because they were hosts that understood that they didn't have to be spinning plates all the time. They could just sort of be together, and that was the important part. I have a friend who was in the Peace Corps in Africa, and when he was there, he learned about a sort of way of being that they talked about, keeping time together. Meaning being in a place together and keeping that time together in that space. Not just working, not just being busy, but keeping that time together. And I think there are great lessons for us as the church in this story, because we do have work to do. Martha did have work to do as the host, and we do have work to do. When we gather and worship on Sunday mornings, there's work that has to be done. The ladies in the altar guild have made sure communion is set up, and the candles are filled with oil. Peter's made sure we've had music. I've worked on a sermon. We've got Sunday school that happens, and people that work to make that happen. When we do mission and service out in the community, there's work that has to be done for that to happen. If we get focused on the tasks, though, then we can get to where we're spinning the plates and forget about the fact that we are the body of Christ in relationship together to go do that work together. And so perhaps what Jesus is gifting with us today is not just work to do, but a way of being in that work that helps us to keep time together. So that you understand when the ladies come to set up communion, they don't just do the work. They catch up with one another. They check in on one another. They have conversation as they go. So the setting up of this is keeping time. When we talk about how it is that we live together as a church, time may be the best place that we can spend our time. Last January, we had an annual meeting and we set out 3 things that were going to be the focus for this year. Faith formation, getting to know our community, and revisiting our purpose, mission, vision, and values. Faith formation. It could be a task, right? It could be we're going to study the Bible together and we're going to do these certain studies and make sure we get it all done in an orderly time period. But faith formation is really about working on our relationship with God, about how it is that we hear that word and how that word shapes us. So it can be a relational thing that we keep time in. There's a group of us, a small team of people that's working out to get to know our community. Again, we can make that into a task of, well, we need to meet with this person, we need to interview that person, and we need to make a chart of all the things we found out so that we understand the need in our community. But if that's all we do, we've missed that opportunity to keep time together in that work, because getting to know the community is about building relationships beyond the walls of this place. So as we do faith formation and build a relationship with God, we get to know our community and keep time together in the community, we start to build those relationships as well. And our community needs it, because the world around us that lives in that divisiveness and that brokenness of relationship needs us to get good at it so that we can carry it out into the world and be that witness to what it looks like to live whole, keeping time together. The third bit of it was how it is that we look at our purpose and our vision and our mission and our values, and those are hanging up around the church and you can read them. And we didn't have concerns with what the language is or what's captured there, because it's all good stuff. But what we talked about was really what's at the heart of it that we value as a congregation. And that really came down to 3 things. The first is being a community of people gathered in this place. And that includes being a community that keeps time together in struggle and difficulty. When others are struggling with grief or with loss or whatever those things are, this community can be that place that helps carry them along. Alongside that is hospitality. How is it that we welcome new people and be a place where they can land and sit soft to keep time with us? So all of that was the first bit of our conversation about community that we had as a council. The second bit of it was then, how do we, in this space, then value the contributions of everyone that's here? From the littlest to the oldest, from those that we would think of as fully able to those that are differently able. How do we, in this community of people, make sure that everyone's gifts are valued? And then the third bit of it was, how do we go outside these walls and take that with us? This community that we build as we keep time together. Mary and Martha are in the same space, and Martha is worried and distracted, and Jesus says, Mary has chosen the one thing. And that one thing in that space is just keeping that relationship with Jesus. As we head through this time as a church, I'm mindful of trying to keep it simple. I've been around churches that have a lot of stuff going on. Sometimes they have the 20% that feel like they're doing all the work, feel like they're kind of burnt out, and they are wondering how they can do more in the community, which means adding more plates, really. Trying to spin more things so that there can be a deeper reach. And what may be counterintuitive to us is that maybe we have to let some of those plates fall, and rather than trying to do more, be more together, by being a strong community together, by building those relationships with us here, healthy ones so that we can carry that with us. And then our doing isn't just tasks. It's not just busyness. It's not just worried and distracted. But it's the life-giving relationship that we have by sitting in the Word and sitting with Jesus together as a community. And we'll be living more into that. The council has started this conversation about how we think about our vision and our values and our purpose. And that conversation will be something you're invited into as we go. We're still working out those steps. But today I want to take one little step with that. And it's a step about keeping time together. There's lots of ways we do this. We can do it when we do mission trips. We can do it when we serve. We can do it in the fellowship hall after worship, where you go out there and have coffee and whatever as we sit and keep time together. But we can also do it in lots of other ways. So today I'm going to invite you to do something before you leave this space. After we do the benediction and we say, go in peace, serve the Lord. Don't go out the door yet. Look around and find somebody who you either don't know at all or who you're not very familiar with, and go have a conversation. And this may be uncomfortable for some of you if you're an introvert. I get that. I'm an introvert, but it's part of keeping time together. So go find somebody that you don't know very well and find one thing you have in common. It might be a person, it might be a place, it might be an experience, it might be a job, it might be a passion, whatever that is. But we have to work on building these connections because that's the gift that Jesus has given us. He gave us the body of Christ. We got all kinds of people in the world that are spiritual but not religious, and they're building little communities. But we've been gifted with this church, and we are the ones that are in it and the caretakers of it. And as we live in this relationship, keeping time together, we really begin to live into that blessing that Mary had at Jesus' feet and that Martha was invited into, to be the people of Jesus in this space with Jesus so that we can carry that love of Jesus with us as we go. So do that before you go today. Find somebody you don't know well. Find one thing in common. And then we'll all go out a little bit more deeply connected than we were, ready to bless the world on the way out the doors. Amen.
Amen.